Hey friends, and welcome back. Today I'm going to look at one type of habit that it is crucial for you to have in the season ahead. I'm going to explain what it is and define it, why it's important, and I'm going to show you how you can implement it into your life by giving you a couple of pointers and steps on how to do so. The type of habit I'm talking about is a keystone habit. And if you implement this into your lives, I can guarantee you will see much fruitfulness and productivity in life and when implementing your habits. So let's get into things. So what is a keystone habit? Well, let's take each term and we'll define it and then come back and see where that brings us. So a keystone is a central stone at the summit of an arch, locking the whole together. A habit is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. So if we marry these two together, we can probably define it as a practice that locks or brings things together. Often in life, we can spend most of our times dealing with the symptoms and not the cause or root of the issue that we're facing and experiencing. And a keystone habit kind of feeds into this. The keystone habit is like a root habit, one that if you get in place will draw everything together, and some of the maybe habits you've got in place that you thought were important maybe won't be, and some other habits will suddenly bring on a whole new lease of life because this keystone habit has drawn them together. I kind of liken it to having a bit of a rhythm and pace to your life that kind of sets the trajectory and keeps you in rhythm. Now, this is very different for different people. It can be sleeping, could be a keystone habit, making the bed, eating, exercise, all of them can feed into it. But for everyone, there'll be something where you think, actually, if I get that in place, 90% or 80 to 90% of all the other things will fall into place because this habit sets the rhythm. Finding a keystone habit was crucial in my journey with living with chronic fatigue. It's enabled me to go from having a bit of a boom and bust rhythm to a more sustainable core rhythm that allows me to be a lot more fruitful and productive even though I've got a limited amount of energy. And my keystone habit is this: it's simply to have 2 hours of activity and then to rest for half an hour. It is as simple as that, but having implemented that into the core of my life and how it operates, I'm now living a much more sustainable and fruitful life. So why are keystone habits important? Well, Charles Duhigg, the author of The Power of a Habit, says this: certain habits can have a domino effect. Get one right and many other habits fall into place naturally. So as I reflect on that quote from Charles, the whole image of a spine and the role it plays in our body comes to mind. I think we can use that as a good imagery to think about keystone habits. So in terms of our spine, the first action that it does is it joins everything together. Lots of things are connected into the spine to enable them to work. So it's the same for keystone habits. Lots of our other habits can slot in to the spine created by our keystone habit and work more effectively than if they were all over the place and acting separately. The second aspect I just want to draw out is the whole aspect of leverage. By our parts of our body being connected into our spine, that we're able to, I suppose, create leverage or lever much more activity from our different parts of our body. So our arms and our legs and everything are much more powerful because they're connected into a central point. So again, with habits, the same thing can happen. Actually, the keystone habit can, if you like, X-factor our other habits and make them more fruitful and productive for us. And the final thing I want to draw out from the sort of spine analogy is the aspect of strength and protection. That's what a spine does, especially to our nerves and everything in our body. So again, the same can be applied to keystone habits, in the sense that if some of our other habits don't work or need protecting in some way, the keystone habit will do that for us. And the bottom line is, if other habit, as long as we keep our keystone habit in place, the other habits can drop away, but we can still function and make progress if we have that in place, because it kind of, like I explained before, it sets that rhythm and sets the pace in how we move forward. In terms of my own experience with this, as I mentioned earlier, one of my keystone habits is to do activity for 2 hours and then have 30 minutes off. That's allowed me to even out the boom and bust aspects of my chronic fatigue. It's enabled me to take those 2 hours and really be able to go deep into things, to know that that's the creative time that I have to really, so that's really provided focus. It's also then allowed other things to sort of plug in. If you like, my exercise routines have kind of plugged into that 2 hour window, which takes up some of the time, which I have to choose and prioritise. But I know if I stick to that habit of 2 hours on, half an hour off, that I'm not going to revert back or go into a negative cycle of things. So the whole aspect of keystone habits for me, and why I've kind of tried to acknowledge them and introduce them, has really helped me work through my living with chronic fatigue. And whether you've got energy limitations or not, I'm sure it would do the same for you. So how do we identify our keystone habits? Well, in order to do that, we really need to understand the process of how habits are formed and the different phases that are involved. And in this video, link coming up here, I really go into this in great detail to explain what you need to know really in terms of how habits are formed. But in the meantime, I'll give you a couple of pointers in terms of what to look out for to find and identify your keystone habits. So the first one is to think about a day when everything has gone well, where things have just gelled together. You come away at the end of the day just thinking, yes, that is a successful day. So think about those instances and look at the day and focus back and see what was in place. It might have been that you got a full 8 hours sleep. It might have been that you exercised in the morning. It might be a combination of those or other things. Then look again at other days where it's been a really what you would call successful and productive day. Have a look at those and see what the common trends come out of them. Now often what will happen is those common trends will be your keystone habits. There will be things you think, right, if I've got those in place, I'm likely to be fruitful and productive on that day. So that's the first pointer. So for the second pointer, we're going to dive back into the book, The Power of Habit. And within that, when defining and looking at keystone habits and how to identify them, Charles says this. He says, find an area where you can have small wins. By achieving small wins, you create forces that then favour another small win. That encourages the next small win, and so on, creating a virtuous cycle. So that's pretty self-explanatory in itself. Look for areas where you can create small wins that automatically lead on to other small wins. And when you do that, there'll be like a cycle of things that begins to develop. And when you have that, you then go back and think, well, actually what started and created those wins, and that is your keystone habit, if you like. So why not try that out for yourself? In terms of my experience, again, the 2 hour block and then 30-minute rest really set the rhythm for me that led on to other habits, which led on to being the right amount of having the right amount of tiredness, if you like, to be able to go to sleep and get 7 to 8 hours sleep, but to have enough energy to be able to do some exercise during one of my 2 hour blocks. So that keystone habit for me, again, it led on, it was a small win, but then multiplied into bigger win. So why not give those things a go and see where you get to. So on to my one last thing. And in today's video, I've really focused on the positive aspects of having a keystone habit. But we also have to acknowledge that it is possible to have a negative keystone habit. One that influences our other habits in a negative way, that really pulls us away from being fruitful and productive, and leads into areas that we put simply don't want to go. So it's important to be aware that you can have a negative keystone habit, and you have to be real with yourself to be able to acknowledge and say, yeah, there's something I've got in place. I need to take measures to be able to eradicate that and cut that out of my life. So take that on board today, and I hope that's helpful. So why not today set some time aside to look at keystone habits, to see whether you have them in place or whether you need to develop them in your life. I promise you they are crucial to being fruitful and productive. So take a look. Please put your comments and thoughts in the comment section below. I'd love to see them, and I'll do my best to comment back and help you more if I can do. Please remember to subscribe as well to this channel. This will make sure that you get the content that I'm producing first before anyone else. But please also share and like this video in order to share it around the YouTube community so more people can benefit. Please also check out these two videos that are coming up. They're also on the subject of habits and other areas that connect in with them. So that's it for today. Be fruitful, and I'll see you in the next video.